Hi. I was a bookish goth in high school and in college and in my young adult life, and yesterday, for that matter. It's still going, I'm afraid. And because I was a bookish goth, I naturally developed a book collection that included works by Neil Gaiman. Yes, that Neil Gaiman, the monster. I even have them over here still. Hold on, let me get it. No, I keep them right behind me. They're still there. I don't take them off of my shelf just because he's been accused of doing horrible, awful things that I believe happened. And the thing that really distresses me is that this isn't a new rodeo for me. Indeed, it often seems like artists of all kinds always wind up being monsters, especially the ones that we most want to be innocent and good. There is, of course, the famous example, at least for those who know me, of Aleister Crowley, whose disrepute is perhaps well beyond his actual horrors and crimes, but others not so much. I do, after all, quite like rock music, with a particular reverence for people like David Bowie and Leonard Cohen, and writers aren't any better. I personally know someone who had an issue with Ginsberg in their youth. Byron is practically famous for the horrors he inflicted on various people, and while many enjoyed it, I'm not sure all of it would be considered consensual by modern standards. Rimbaud, Verlaine, even Socrates was known for taking young boys into his bed. And while Plato portrays it as Socrates being harassed and pushed into submission by the likes of Alcibiades, Plato was a bit of a fanboy himself. Certainly the institutionalized pederasty is not something we usually approve of today, which would make so many of the ancient great thinkers monsters by modern standards. I'm barely scratching the surface here. My point is that of the lives we know, a remarkable number of them involved plenty of horrible indiscretions. And the fact that we don't know the full story of others doesn't mean they're innocent. It just means that if they committed horrors, we don't know about them. Artists, it seems, are monsters. And it's no wonder they are. Art always creates a power imbalance between the artist and the connoisseur. The fan imagines the artist the creator of the wonderful worlds or the entrancing music that they enjoy, and they fall in love with that image. They don't even need to meet the person who made the things they adore for this to happen. The imagined person that they love is conceived from the art alone. And the idol, for their part, knows precisely what they're encouraging, and they expect to be adored by the fans who appreciate them and who approach them. Male musicians are absolutely famed for starting music, for joining or making a band, precisely for that reason, so that they can meet women who would be happy to satisfy their needs with relatively little resistance, and that even if they're gangly and gawky and haven't outgrown their acne yet. Having a guitar, standing behind a microphone, this is enough to seduce many people, and that art of seduction prompts the creation of a great deal of art. And while yes, many artists and musicians legitimately love their craft, they love what they make, but I still think it's quite common for people to have that ulterior motive. How much do we do, after all, that isn't meant to put us in the good graces of others in one capacity or another? And it seems a fair enough way to win people over. Create something wonderful, accept your payment in the form of flesh and adoration. But being accustomed to ready access to whomever strikes your fancy does create monsters. It creates the expectation of satisfaction, and it creates a reverence on the part of those who might be conquered that makes them more vulnerable to exploitation. When someone is better than us, or when we imagine they are, we often like to ingratiate ourselves to them. And being an artist does that. Art creates a power imbalance in the form of a glamour cast over the artist. They are miraculous, half-imagined, brilliant, cool, unique. The dream they project with their status as creators is the lure. It's not their personality, it's not their social skills. It's that notion of them as genius, as artist, as creator. And the artists who accept repayment in the form of dalliances are paid for their time, for their creation, for their effort, with adoration and touch. It is perhaps better payment than money. But the oddity of it is that the fan doesn't generally love the actual person. They love the art and engage with the person as a proxy for that art. We lose track of who we're actually interacting with when we do this. Artists who accept this exchange don't actually give of themselves. They allow their fan to be in love with the parasocial dream of them, and they take their bodies under that pretense. With rock stars, everyone expects it. But it's clear that writers and filmmakers are repaid in like kind more than often enough. Whether they enter the art for that purpose quite as often as musicians do, I can't say. Probably not. But plenty enough are rewarded in that way, regardless of their intentions. And what I want to know is whether this is ever ethical. Is it ever right to let someone be in love with their idea of you and to take advantage of them because of their love of their idea of you? Or is it as suspect as the 50s boss exploiting his secretary? I know I feel sick thinking about a lot of the artist's side door. Entirely too much has come out about far too many of them. Far too many of the creators I admire have turned out to be awkward, socially inept, funny-looking people who take advantage of others. And certainly it's not always wrong. Some fans pursue the creators knowing full well that they're just odd people who created wonderful things. Their eyes are clear and open, and they see the exchange for exactly what it is. That's okay, right? Assuming everyone's of age. Where is the line between the person who was deceived into admiring someone who they otherwise would despise, and the clear-eyed fan who knows that they're exchanging physical comfort for artistic gratification? I don't know, and I'm not even sure the people who engage in either side of this bargain know, not definitively. I know I've heard a lot of stories that seem credible from both sides of the account. I can believe that usually women and girls are exploited, and I can believe that the artists presumed it was consensual, ordinary, what they usually see. After all, our past experience creates our expectations. If you're accustomed to people throwing themselves at you, then you will assume that most people want that kind of company and contact from you. If minimal prodding is usually sufficient, then you may find yourself prodding or even coercing when you see resistance. You'll presume it isn't genuine resistance, but a game or a ploy for continued engagement to add a bit of challenge to the conquest. And maybe sometimes these women, these girls, these men and boys who give in to these advances wouldn't agree if the person wasn't famous, wealthy, powerful, brilliant. Is it wrong to leverage that kind of power in that way? If a person bows because they might lose their housing or their safety if they don't, that's certainly wrong, right? What about losing the respect of someone you admire? Surely that's similar. power takes a million forms, and imbalances inevitably create coercion. That coercion may be accidental, it may be unconscious, but it is necessarily present whenever there is inequality between two people. How much of it is deliberate? How much of it is accidental? Do we always know? I'm not sure we do. And anyway, is it always wrong? Is your secretary always off limits? What if she actively flirts and approaches you, and you think she looks delightful and is trying to seduce you? Is that wrong? Certainly implying that you're going to fire your employee if they don't sleep with you is wrong. But I'm not sure about the other direction, and so often in cases with fans, the fans are the initiators. What does that add to this dynamic? What questions does it raise? How does it alter the morality of the thing? For many years, my rule of thumb has been that if there is a power imbalance, it should always be the less powerful person who raises the proposition, because the person with less power is less able to coerce the person with more power, wealth, status. But I'm not sure that's actually any better. When someone that we don't want, who is beneath us, comes up to us, we tend to assume that we're being stalked or harassed or otherwise browbeaten by pure persistence into caving to their demands. Either way, there's real awkwardness that may be insurmountable, at least insurmountable without significant awkwardness. Arguably, it's weirder and creepier when the person with less power, with less charisma, comes up to the person with more, because they're stepping outside of their lane to hunt down someone who's their better. I feel like that sort of thing used to be illegal. It's audacious. It's not exploitative. Not unless there's active stalking involved, but there is something uncouth about it. So, if it isn't right for the less powerful person, and it isn't right for the more powerful person to approach someone else, what do we do? How do we actually start relationships? How do we find people that we want to have a one-night stand with, for instance? Do we flirt? Do we have to get to know each other in depth? From memory, holistic people clock when people are flirting with them at odds roughly equivalent to chance, and I don't imagine autists are any better at this. So we kind of suck at knowing when people are flirting with us. We often assume they are flirting when they're not, and we often miss it when people are trying to catch our attention that way. So that's clearly not a definitive solution to this particular problem of knowing when someone is interested and only approaching them when we know that they are. The only real way to know for certain is to ask explicitly, are you interested in me in this way? I am interested in you in this way. Can we make a deal? Can we make this work? Is this what you want? And people can still lie. Women in particular are often rather demure in rejecting someone because they're afraid of the violence that can come from rejection. How then is a man supposed to know that you genuinely aren't interested? We say no means no, but that also doesn't allow for persuasion, for pursuit, for seduction. Monsters, actual monsters, they seek to violate people. They aim to cause harm. They want suffering. They want to violate consent. Those people are definitively and unequivocally bad news. We have nothing with them. But what about those of us who aim to convince others to accept us, who enjoy the art of seduction, who enjoy being seduced? I may not be interested in someone now, but if they exert themselves in the right way, I might be brought to their side. Is that coercion? Does that violate consent? I think by modern standards, yeah, it does. And I remember being on both sides of this as a youth, and when it worked out well, it was unspeakably delightful. And when it worked out poorly, in either direction, it was painful for both parties. I think our emphasis on open communication and just asking and speaking plainly and always respecting the no or the yes for that matter is an attempt to avoid the pain that comes when you misjudge someone and pursue when you shouldn't, or when someone doesn't go away when you'd really like them to. But it also annihilates that capacity to attract someone through persistence, through thoughtfulness, through asking them more than once, even if they rejected you the first or second time. And there is something romantic about being won over by persistence. Previous generations had it as a general romantic trope. They expected the woman, always the woman, to reject the man at first, but he would keep going, and they would eventually meet up. We see the same thing in Jane Austen novels, this time with the woman, Elizabeth Bennet, persisting in getting the man. Nowadays, we call that coercion. We call it gross, creepy stalkery. I'm not sure we're right. The most enthusiastic consent doesn't always come automatically. It can come over time after you learn the other person's character, their passion, and their persistence. A lot of the appeal of love in the early days, certainly of infatuation with someone you haven't quite caught yet, or who is starting to catch your eye even though you wouldn't have initially considered them, is uncertainty. You don't know if they will accept you. You don't know if they really are aiming to pursue you. And that's where the butterflies in the stomach come from. It's that uncertainty that leads to magnetic attraction to other people. When we know for certain, when consent is sufficiently enthusiastic that there's no doubt whatsoever, when we know that they're in our corner and they're staying in our corner, we take them for granted. There's not the fear and the anxiety about whether it will last, whether it's real, whether it's safe. And because that fear isn't there, the excitement is lesser, the romance is lesser, and the passion is reduced, or, in the worst cases, removed. And I wonder if the kids these days are quite good about consent, if they ask each other carefully and always respect it when people say no. Is that why they have so much less fun than my generation did? Is that why they go out less, interact less, date less, and have fewer partners? Are they working so hard to respect each other that they're destroying everyone's fun by destroying the danger that creates the fear that adds to the tension of romance, especially early romance? I don't know. I'd hate to be dating today and all of this immediate and permanent respect, this condemnation of coercion, and this abandonment of seduction completely destroys the chase in romance. And while I've never been particularly fond of being chased, I do quite love chasing people and singling someone out and winning them over, one joke, one smile, one sachet at a time. There's something delightful in going after someone and eventually, delightfully, winning them over. It lets us ruffle our feathers, showcase ourselves, peacock, brag, and display all that we have on offer. And as a reward, sometimes we get the person we're after. I'm not sure what the fun is in not going through any of that, at simply discussing things early and respecting whatever's said. But I do acknowledge the risk in pushing after someone has expressed initial disinterest or serious hesitation. But there's a desire for the other person, and it can be created for you, that comes from the persistence that we now so often call coercion. from the seduction that is a bit suspect in modern times. Sure, we're objectifying someone when we're going after them, regardless of what they say, and we're objectifying ourselves when we're setting ourselves up as an enticing treat that they could embrace if they desired. But that's part of the thrill. Romance, love, sex, these things aren't always a contract entered into with purely sober minds, and that's part of the appeal. It's certainly part of the romance. It's a bit irrational, senseless, impulsive, and unreasoningly passionate. There's a delicious thrill to not being entirely reasonable. And I feel like the youth are losing that. And I feel like our pursuit of protecting the vulnerable at all costs is leading to us losing that. Imbalances of power, needing to persuade and seduce, these are entirely improper, but they're extremely exciting. I often feel like in the modern mind, these decadent fantasies must be confined to books and poetry and music. They're not things that it's okay to live anymore. Romance, passion, and a full-throated pursuit of the beautiful and the inspiring isn't okay anymore. We call that stalkerish, coercive, disrespectful. We aim to prevent regret. We aim to prevent exploitation. But we also lose the deliberate exploitation and the push and pull of seduction when we let go of all of that. But yes, there is real potential for harm when we do aim to seduce, when we try to implicitly worm our way into someone else's heart. And when we misjudge, real violations occur. There was some of this in a recording of Neil Gaiman talking to one of his victims that I saw in a video. She was discussing that he had done terrible things, which pretty well acknowledged at this point. And he responded, "But why did you kiss me?" To which she said, "I didn't." It doesn't sound like something you'd be able to mistake, but I certainly have. If you are too exuberant in your pursuit, it is easy to mistake someone trying to push you away to someone passionately embracing you, someone trying to appease you and push you from their own mouth as kissing back. When it connects, these transgressions are delightful, but when it doesn't, they're terrors, horrors. Not something anyone would want to find out that they did, much less something any of us would want done to us. Explicit conversations, safe words, they prevent all of these things, but they also prevent the passion of connections that happen against all odds as the result of persistence and passion pushed into reality despite fear and trepidation and hesitation. I'm beginning to think that seduction itself is problematic. Winning someone over is more intoxicating than a physical union itself could ever be. I understand why he may have made that mistake. I know why I made it, and that is exactly why. You want someone, you think that if you keep pushing, they will want you as well. You are used to being wanted after all, but they don't. And you don't always know that at the time. Which is not an excuse, but I genuinely don't know how we are supposed to preserve that passion, that intensity, that delight of conquest while preserving and maintaining the safety that we all want. I'm starting to wonder if arranged marriages aren't the solution to this problem. We all engage each other. We all court each other with chaperones, and then we sign our papers, and then, only then, can we touch each other. No miscommunication is possible, no violation, no harm is possible. We just do what we say and what we promise we will do. No more and no less than that. But I think it's fairly clear that there's no romance in that. Certainly not the fiery passion of conquest. Passion, when it is allowed to drive us, will always carry within it the potential for mistakes. It is precisely that potential that creates the butterflies in our stomach, that makes us infatuated rather than merely fond of someone else. I'm not sure we ought to sacrifice limerence on the altar of certainty. I'm not sure that safety is worth the sacrifice of that much elated satisfaction of the joy of conquest. Can love survive such a desire for safety? Does destroying spontaneity doom sexual tension? Is this why the younger generations aren't getting it on like previous generations were? Are they all too polite, too respectful, too careful? Maybe they're right to hesitate, to avoid all the mistakes that we made. It's certain that being careless, pursuing at all costs, causes incalculable pain. I've been on both sides of that. I've been on the side of the pursuer who pursued for far too long and did not stop soon enough, and there is pain in knowing you caused that pain. And I've also been stalked, which wasn't great. But I'm not sure I want to live in a world where there is no passionate hunt for the beloved, where neither I nor anyone else can pursue the men or the women who catch our eye, who might not be convinced they want us yet. They may adore us passionately in time once we win their hearts, and we may feel the same about them. What is love without conquest, without winning people over and being won over in turn? Just consent. Safer, kinder, but much more boring. I don't know the right answer to any of this. I don't like when anyone gets hurt. I don't like being hurt, and I don't like hurting others. But I also don't want a world without that particular pleasure. Maybe some mistakes are forgivable in the face of passion. Maybe we can forgive ourselves, and maybe we can forgive each other. Maybe, just maybe, we can err while being human rather than being cast as monsters. Maybe mistakes motivated by misapprehensions don't make us monsters at all. Maybe we don't have to be perfect. We just have to do the best we can. But the modern world would certainly disagree, and who am I to correct any of them? There are no solutions here, just love of love, and a distaste for needless pain. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.